Katoa, Namai Hainemai, one, and thank you for the opportunity to share our work today. My name is Farhad Mehdipour. I serve as head of department, management and research director at Future Skills. My role focuses on program development, academic quality enhancement, and leading research initiatives. Much of my work is in curriculum development, learner engagement, and the integration of emerging education. Today, I'll briefly introduce Future Skills, provide context about our learners, and then outline how our organization has been investing in learner success capability. I'll then introduce the ALSF projects before my colleagues share more detail. So, Future Skills has been delivering education for over 25 years, and our programs range from foundation level through to master's level qualifications, and we support a wide spectrum of learners entering tertiary education through to international and professional learners. In terms of delivery, we operate both campus-based learning in Auckland as well as digitally enabled national delivery. Our programs also cover both technical niche areas and wide range of professional subject areas. This diversity means that many of the approaches we are developing around learner success are relevant across the sector. To give some context about our learners in 2025, Future Skills served approximately 2,300 learners. Our learner population is diverse, around 21% are international students. We have a strong and growing participation from more in Pacifica learners, representing approximately 5% and 6%. So in terms of gender, our learners are around 55% female and 45% male. Around 88% of our learners are over the age of 25, with around 12% under 25. The diversity creates a complex learning environment with diverse needs and highlights the importance of having strong systems to understand and respond to learner needs. With respect to the equity and parity of outcomes, it's a key focus for us. In 2023, we achieved parity of outcomes for Maori learners. And importantly, we have maintained that parity since then, while Maori enrollments slightly grow and remain relatively stable. More recently, in 2025, we achieved parity of outcomes for Pacifica learners. During that period, Pacifica enrollments increased substantially, while we continue to maintain strong learner outcomes. For us, this reflects substantial organization-wide approach from addressing structural barriers, developing strong people capabilities, and working with our learners and stakeholders to improve outcomes for our learners. For the past 4 years, Future Skills has invested more than $2 million in strengthening our learner success capability. This investment has focused on 2 key areas. First, people. We have invested in a specialist student support resources and staff development across the organization to improve learner support practices across the organization. And the second improvement has been in the area of systems and technology. So we have developed data dashboards, student support systems such as at-risk student support app, and analytics tools that allow us to better understand learner needs. Together, these investments allow us to make more informed decisions and move toward a more proactive approach to supporting learners. One example of how this investment translates into practice is a dashboard shown here. This is a dashboard covering student support referrals across our organization through at-risk student support app that we have developed. And this dashboard gives us an overview of referrals, types, trends, and analytics. The app allows us to track referrals and support actions, and to understand both academic and well-being needs across our learner population. Staff can also prioritize support interventions and monitor outcomes across programs, learner groups, and even at intake levels. The overall goal is to enable coordinated support across the learner life cycle, track progress and trends to inform strategies. So the work I've described created a foundation for our involvement in the Accelerating Learner Success Fund. And we initially submitted an expression of interest proposing 6 different initiatives. From those 6 initiatives, 2 projects were funded by TC. The first project focuses on just-in-time support, which aims to proactively identify at-risk learners and enable earlier support. The second project focuses on learner journey mapping, which aims to better understand learner needs across the student life cycle. The further 2 initiatives were self-funded by us, one completed in 2025 and another one is currently in progress. At this point, I'll hand over to my colleague, Kanika, who has been leading this the first project, just-in-time support project, to share more detail.
Thanks, Farhad. I'm Kanika Hans. I'm Head of IT and Technology Solutions at Future Skills and involved in design and development of systems and processes for our staffs and learners. And I've worked as a project lead for Just-in-Time Extension. This presentation provides an overview on the Just-in-Time Extension initiative, which was developed as a part of Accelerated Learner Success Fund. This initiative enhances the at-risk app by introducing predictive analytics to identify learners who may need support earlier. The predictive work is now integrated into our broader student support ecosystem, enabling us to intervene earlier and improve learner success and retention. The previous at-risk app, which Farhad introduced earlier in his presentation, that was introduced in 2023 to help identify learners who required support. That system relied on event-based triggers such as low attendance, assessment, performance, or lecturer referrals. Once a lecturer identifies a learner who is not engaging in class, they would refer the learner to student support teams using our online referral system. This referral-based tool played a significant role in supporting over 1,200 learners and contributed to improved learner outcomes across the institution. While the original at-risk app was very effective, the system was largely reactive. The triggers such as absenteeism or low assessment results appeared only after the disengagement started. The GIT extension, which we developed as part of this initiative, addresses the limitation by proactively identifying learners who are likely to become at risk before traditional triggers appear. It aggregates data from institutional systems and applies predictive analytics to detect patterns and early indicators of disengagements using variables such as academic history, program type, demography, and historical student performance. This timeline illustrates the phased delivery of the GIT initiative. The project progressed from foundational data preparation through to predictive modeling and finally system integration with support alerts. Firstly, data sources for student demographics, enrollments, engagements are integrated, cleaned, and validated. The historical data of last 4 years was then segmented. Historical data, which was then analyzed to understand the withdrawal rates and completion rates against individual key factors or a combination of key factors. Attendance data for all the students was then analyzed against course completions. Models were built to predict completion patterns. System triggers was then added to show probability of support needs at the application stage. The data collected in the initial step was classified into several key categories to understand student demographics such as age, gender, citizenship, academic history like the highest qualification, secondary schools they have attended, pre-study activity, and engagement levels. Each category provides unique insights at the institutional level, program level, as well as individual student level that are critical for identifying patterns which are related to student retention and success. By examining the relationship between key factors, we uncovered actionable insights that may inform future strategies for improving student outcomes at Future Skills. These are few examples of the insights of the independent analysis done for key factors. This analysis forms the basis for development of predictive model and alert system. We have also developed a model that analyzes attendance records based on time, allowing us to observe patterns and cycles across different programs and periods. By viewing attendance trends over time, we can detect consistent cycles such as reduced attendance during certain months or weeks or across different programs. This tool provides insights at various levels from the organization-wide perspective down to individual classes. Alert systems are now implemented to notify student success teams when absenteeism risks rise for a particular class or program in each month. This approach equips student success teams with actionable data to proactively intervene in high-risk classes or programs, tailor support strategies to the specific needs of a cohort, and enhance their overall attendance and improve student outcomes. By analyzing historical data and understanding the key factors contributing to successful completions, we then build a model that predicts whether a student is likely to complete a course successfully or they would need the support. This data was prepared for machine learning model development, leveraging various libraries for data manipulation and transformation. Two different modeling strategies were tried to determine the most effective approach for predicting student success based on prepared data set. The data set was then refined through additional feature engineering. After validation of the model, we developed a REST API and a UI to support non-technical users. Success and withdrawal rates were calculated at the granularity of student program factor combinations. Students were then categorized into various outcome groups to support analysis of their academic progression. These categories are low priority, medium priority, and high priority indicators. Each category was accompanied by corresponding percentage metrics to reflect success and failure rates, facilitating further segmentation and trend analysis. During the final phase of the predictive model, the model was integrated into the CRM application processing system. When a student applies, a backend process calls a predictive model through a REST API. The model evaluates applicant characteristics and returns a support indicator with a probability score. If the risk exceeds a configured threshold, the system flags the application so interventions can be planned before the student begins the classes. We conducted predictive modeling on a cohort of 1,300 learners who had previously required support where intervention was historically identified manually by lecturers. Using the GIT extension, we were able to retrospectively analyze the group and identify patterns of risk. Out of 1,300 learners, we found that 600 were flagged as high priority based on their behavior and indicators captured through the model. When we reviewed the actual outcomes for these high priority learners, we found that 90% had either withdrawn or did not successfully complete their course. This was a critical insight. It demonstrates that the model is now highly effective at identifying learners who are at genuine risk of poor outcomes. If the same group had been identified earlier in their learning journey, we could have implemented timely and targeted interventions. This gives us a strong validation that early identification through predictive modeling can meaningfully influence learner outcomes. We can now use the GIT extension data to compare different intakes indicators to better understand where learner support is most needed and how we can plan for learner success more effectively. If there are 10 intakes starting at the same time, this analysis helps us to estimate the overall support demand, how many learners are high priority indicators in advance. The real value comes when we move across the aggregate view and go into more granular intake level analysis. Not all the intakes behave same. So by identifying these patterns, we can prioritize specific intake groups that are more likely to need additional support, rather than applying a uniform approach across all cohorts. This allows us to design more targeted interventions. In other words, this shifts our approach from retrospective identification to proactive data-informed approach. By leveraging this model in real time, we can now identify at-risk learners much earlier, prioritize high-impact support groups, and ultimately improve their retention and completion rates. Seamless backend integration and ensures minimal manual processing while maintaining data privacy and compliance. Lecturers are now equipped with the insights that help tailor engagement strategies from day one. These predictions are advisory in nature and used to support and not replace academic judgment. At an individual lecturer or lower organization level, visibility of these indicators is limited to prevent unintended bias, protect learner privacy, and ensure that any interventions are carried out in a controlled and appropriate manner. Over the past year, we have seen a meaningful improvement in learner retention. In 2024, our early withdrawal rate was 15.7%. By 2025, we managed to reduce that to 9.6%. What this means in real terms is not just a percentage drop. It translates to 119 learners who stayed engaged and continued their studies instead of leaving early. That's 119 more people progressing through their learning journey, gaining skills, and moving closer to completion. JIT has been one of the several contributors to this improvement. Student support referrals to the Student Support app has also reduced by 34%. Instead of waiting for learners to reach a stage where they require escalation through the app, we are identifying and addressing challenges earlier in their journey. It reflects that improved visibility of learner needs and better coordination across teams, allowing us to intervene at the right time with the right level of support. Importantly, a reduction in referral doesn't mean a reduction in need. It means that the support is being delivered more effectively upstream, reducing pressure on the teams. This is all about JIT extension. Our next steps for JIT is to continue monitoring and improve predictive model accuracy. As more and more data become available, we'll refine the predictive model and continue tracking the long-term impact on retention and completion rates. Thank you, everyone. Now I'll pass it to my colleague, Varuni. Thank you.
Thank you, Kanika. Kia ora, everyone. And thank you for your time to be here today. I'm Dr. Varuni Hevage, working as a senior lecturer at Future Skills and also the project lead for Learner Journey Mapping project. And it's my pleasure to present our Learner Journey Mapping initiative, which was funded by Tertiary Education Commission's Accelerating Learner Success Fund. So this project focuses on tailoring educational services to diverse learner groups. The goal is to develop more refined and data-driven understanding of our learners. By doing this, we plan to ensure equitable success for different learner groups across our institution. This project was a highly collaborative effort. I would like to acknowledge the co-working group, including Dr. Asantika Imbulpitia, Dr. Edwin Raja, who have joined here with me today to present the project, and also Dr. Jaime Abdulatif and Bruno Balduzi. We were also supported by two external advisors, Adjunct Professor Jacqueline Whaley, who provided academic oversight, and also Dr. Karaitiana Tairo, who ensured strong cultural grounding. Together, our team ensured that this work is both statistically rigorous and also culturally responsive. Okay, now let's move to the content of today's presentation. It is structured in three parts. I will begin with the background and rationale for the project. Then Asantika will explain about the research design process, and finally Edwin will present the key findings and the strategic recommendations. When we talk about the project background, the motivation for this project comes from an important trend that we have observed over time. Even though most students are enrolling, it is also observed that the students are also dropping out early. This tells us that our current support systems aren't sufficient or aren't working for everyone in the same way. So instead of relying on assumption or anecdotal evidence, we wanted to use a research-based approach with real data to better understand students' actual experience throughout their journey. To do this, we adopted a proactive evidence-based approach We examine learner experience across 4 key stages of their journey, which is enrollment, orientation, study period, and the completion stage. Given this project background, we had 3 main goals. First, we wanted to identify different learner personas and map out their learner journey. Second, we wanted to identify what are the enablers and challenges for learner success for different learner groups. And third, we aim to design tailored support strategies for different learner groups. To guide this, we ask questions about their experience, such as most of these questions are based on their experience that they are already had. What are the support services contributed to their success, and what could have been enabled their success and the learning experience more successfully, and what are the distinct needs of different learner groups. These questions helped us understand students' overall experience during their entire learning journey. Thank you, and I'll now hand over to Asantika to discuss about the research design.
Thanks, Varuni. So as Varuni mentioned, we wanted our study to be evidence-based, and our research design played a huge role in that. So as indicated in this diagram here, to make sure our findings were reliable, we used 2 main methods. First, we ran a large survey to reach as many as students possible, so we could get a broad picture of their experiences. As you can see, we received 822 responses, and after data cleaning, we managed to work with 684 responses out of them. We ran a couple of statistical analysis on this data, and apart from those outcomes, one of the main outcomes we identified in stage 1 was the emergence of our learner categories. That actually was the input of the second part of our study. So once the first stage was finished, we carried out 50 follow-up interviews. We selected participants from different learner groups to make sure a wide range of perspectives were included. Also, we used this mixed method to triangulate our data as a measure to cross-check our findings from different sources to make sure they are more reliable. So once that stage was done, this gave us a broad big picture view and also deep insights into our student experience. Now in part 2, to better understand the data in the quantitative analysis, we actually did a principal component analysis, or a PSA. This helped us simplify a large data set into key patterns that explain what students are experiencing. So in this PCA study, we identified 2 main factors. The first relates to how supported students feel at the beginning of their journey, like during orientation and early guidance. And the second relates to the challenges they face during their studies. It could be including academics, skills, and well-being. Now, once these 2 factors were identified in first stage of the analysis, we use a K-means clustering to group students to get an idea about their similar experiences. Now, this resulted in 2 main groups. The first group had lower levels of support at the start, but they were generally able to cope up with their studies. The second group was more aware about the available support, but still faced ongoing challenges throughout their learning. Now, this initial study showed us that different students need different types of support, and most definitely one-size-fits-all approach would not work in this kind of a scenario. Some needs better onboarding, while other needs continuous support throughout their journey. Now, these initial insights help us quite a lot to realize we need to design more targeted strategies to improve student success and retention. And also, I believe this provides us a very solid foundation before digging in deep and moving on to our second stage of analysis. Now, as I mentioned, apart from the statistical work we did based on our first stage, the main outcome of that stage was the emergence of our learner categories. In total, we profiled 10 distinct learner groups, which indicates how diverse our student body is. So once that first stage was done, we invited a representative sample from each group to participate in the second stage, where we explored their individual experiences in more depth. Now, for the qualitative data in our second stage of study, we did an inductive thematic analysis Now, since multiple researchers were involved in this coding process, we used a consensus approach to make sure that our findings are reliable. Now, from this, we identified 3 key themes, which my colleague will explain after a bit. Now, overall, this gave us both the structured data and also the second stage provided us real student perspectives to guide our recommendations. I'll now hand over to Edwin to discuss some important insights that emerged from the second part of our analysis.
Thank you, Asantika. In this part, I'll run through the findings and some of the suggestions as a result of the findings of the report. From our quantitative and qualitative data analysis, we collected the information provided a good perspective of the 10 learner groups. Now, these categories, as indicated earlier, were the young, mature, professional learners, Maori, Pacifica, Kiwi migrant learners, and then we have the part-time and full-time, and learners who did not complete their studies. Now, given the broad diversity in these groups, it would be, I think, plausible to think there's probably good variation in learning needs among these groups. If so, like Santika suggested, a one-size-fits-all approach is less likely to be effective, addressing the distinct needs of each of these 10 groups. So in undertaking the analysis, we actually came up with 3 broad themes from the data analysis to offer a better picture of how to meet the diverse needs of these 10 groups. So the 3 themes that we came up were called enablers, second, learning challenges, thirdly, learning support. So if you look at enablers and learning and support for success, these are driven by the learning providers in terms of how we can promote learning success. Learning challenges tend to be related to individual students, the learning groups, and the difficulties of each of these learning groups. Right? So by understanding more specifically what the challenges are for each of the learning groups, it is possible for educational providers to offer more targeted approaches to better support the needs of each of these groups. So in the final report, we have actually developed 10 personas for each of the learning groups. But for this presentation, we have chosen to limit it to 5 as an illustrative example. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually look at these 5 groups and apply 3 dimensions, see how each of the dimensions offer different aspects or differences for each of the groups in terms of how we can address the learning needs of each of these groups. So the 3 dimensions we're looking at is what are the needs of these learners in these 5 categories? What are some of the risk-taking aspects in terms of these learners, these 5 learners, and then how do they actually seek help? So if we look at the learning needs dimension, and we look at young learners, for example, young learners tended to prefer structured guidance, while mature students tended to prefer more practical learning and applied learning options. Professional learners, on the other hand, valued immediacy of application of their learning. Maori learners, on the other hand, tended to emphasizing the importance of belonging and learning within a community environment. And learners at risk highlighted the need for flexibility in early intervention to support retention. This kind of ties in with what Kanika was talking about much earlier in the earlier presentation. Now, for the context of the risk dimension, young learners tended to disengage when there was perceived lack of structure. Mature learners tended to fall behind due to literacy challenges, digital literacy challenges. Professional learners were at risk because they were overloaded with work. Maori learners experience disconnection when there's a lack of cultural fit. And finally, learners at risk often feel overwhelmed by life pressures in inflexible learning support systems. Now, for the third dimension of help-seeking behavior, we found that young learners were more likely to seek help when clear support pathways are available. Mature learners would seek assistance if it's easily accessible. Professional learners tend to be independent and more proactive in seeking support. Maori learners tended to be more hesitant in seeking help. And learners at risk often disengaged early before seeking support. So these three kind of profiles, the profiles for all these 5 personas tell us that each of these groups are a bit different in terms of their needs, the risk dimensions, and their help-seeking behavior. So these differences also show the importance of tailored approaches or more targeted approach in terms of learning, supporting student success is important. Based on these insights, we propose 5 recommendations. First is improve onboarding and processes to provide clear guidance, strengthen digital literacy supportable learner confidence and capability, develop more flexible delivery models to fit diverse needs and commitments, enhance student-tutor engagement approaches to foster connection and support, and finally, develop career and industry pathways to improve relevance and learner motivations. We think together these strategies will provide a more targeted and meaningful support to improve student success and retention. In moving forward, we think that the Learner Journey Mapping Initiative has provided a very strong foundation for scalable evidence-based improvements for learning delivery. By refining approaches, we can shift from a reactive to a proactive learner support approach. This will enable us to embed greater equity within the teaching and learning practices. To conclude, the Learner Journey Initiative has presented as a great opportunity to design learning services for learners. By recognizing diverse learning experiences and adopting a more data-informed approach, we think learning providers can provide more inclusive, responsive, and resilient learning environments. More importantly, we think this approach has presented an opportunity for learners to develop learning services using learner experiences. Thank you for your time, and I now pass you on to Nick Diani, who will present the next part of our presentation. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Nikia ni toku ingoa, te rangatira o tēnā kura Future Skills Domestic. Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to everybody who's taken time to be here for our presentation. My name is Nikia. I'm the Chief Executive for Domestic Operations for Future Skills. Today, I just wanted to take some time to show some of the examples of learner success approach in practice. I could see that we have a lot of stakeholders that are outside the PTE sector as well. So I'll just probably talk about the diversity and impact of our sector before I start with the presentation. If you look at the 2024 data, PTEs received about 15% of total TEC funding and still accounted for 20.14% of total Maori and 22.47% of total Pacifica funded learners in the system. This reflects a strong local connection and diversity of learners served. And PTEs are of a wide range and very different niches and general as well. So we have PTEs that might be serving only 10 Fs a year, and we have PTEs that would serve thousands of Fs a year. When we look at the sector as a whole, in 2020, for example, 2 South Auckland PTEs delivered some of the best results for Maori learners, when we are looking at least 60 Fs or higher of Maori learners with them. And then there is one large national PTE that had delivered phenomenal outcomes for Pacifica learners at a substantial amount of learner population as well. And I could actually see a couple of those PTEs attending this presentation. So there is a strong example of excellence across both small and large PTEs. Now, why does context matter? Every PTE is unique. We do different kind of programs. We serve different kind of learner groups. And there is a unique characteristic about it. There's the location, there's community relationships. So there's a wide range of diversity in the PTE sector. If you look at ourselves, between 2022 to 2025, 33% of our learners were low prior achievement learners as defined by TEC. So we look at excellence across the sector, but also we are recognizing our own mix of programs, our learner groups and aspirations. So it is always important for us to define learner success in our own context and focus on steady improvements in our own context for a broader goal. Now, it'll be straightforward to say that there is no single model of success, but there are some shared approaches and principles that would apply in every context. And that's what I would like to share today. Now, when we look at what we do, we are pretty much aligned with the TEC Learner Success Framework. It is about looking at success, doing the diagnostics, defining a problem, doing analysis, looking at a strategy, designing it, and implementing it. So what we do fundamentally doesn't change from that, and that is a solid structure to look at, or a framework to look at when we are looking at learner success. Now, there is which many of my colleagues will be aware, there's a TEC Learner Success Diagnostic Tool, which is a good starting point when we are looking at learner success in the organization holistically. As you can see, the graph you have there is where we stand as of 2025 in terms of our learner success capability summary. So we are somewhere in the mid-journey of where we want to be, and we know it'll be probably 4 to 5 years to get to ideal state of where we want to be in terms of learner success. I think there will be different ways of doing this, and this is how we do it. But the underlying important principle for us is that we want to have clear learner success goals that is well communicated and ensure everybody participates and take ownership of that learner success goals. So broadly, we have some key goals across the organization that typically don't change. Example of one of those goals is our students achieve successfully. And then there are various objectives below that goal. So in this context, an example would be parity of outcomes for Maori and Pacifica learners. Now, our goals and objectives are pretty much remain stable for long periods of time, unless there is a shift in our requirements of our stakeholders. But what varies for us yearly is an annual target. So an example of an annual target in 2024 was to bring the Pacifica parity gap to less than 3%. When we are looking at our targets, these are actually set annually at a board level. We look at our current performance, and we always say it should be a simple and realistic target. And we also have a target continuity. So it is achieved through sustained focus. It's a multi-year project. Example, our Pacifica focus was almost 3 years long to achieve some of the outcomes that we really wanted to do. Then we focus on aligned communication and delivery. So at the start of the year, everybody gets together and you say, right, these were our goals from last year. Where did we end up? And here are the goals for the new year. So we all communicate about what the goals, everybody across the organization. Our departments go out and do planning towards those goals. And then we do an ongoing monthly tracking across those goals at team levels. And then we do 2 formal reviews in the year, mid-year and end of the year, where we are basically going back and saying, okay, these are our goals for the year. Where is our progress? What is the corrective actions that we need to take? So the underlying message for us was keeping goals simple and visible, and enabling an organization-wide alignment and sustained improvement. Enabling people to support learner success. Now, being a CE in education for relatively reasonable time, I know people are not in education for money. I think the motivations for people to work in education is very, very different. There is the community spirit. There is the intention to spread knowledge and share their experiences and improve the next generation of people that are there. So most important thing we see in our organization is that, okay, we have all these people who are willing and capable, who now have a direction of what we want to achieve. Do they have all the skills and tools to do the job that is in front of them? The skills can be cultural competencies. Nowadays, it is working with neurodiverse learners. Or is it de-escalation in youth context, or understanding and supporting mental health? Or actually, we have so many systems. Do they have the digital capability and like information technology training to look at it? Tools can be anything from data analytics, tracking and scheduling, supporting teaching and assessment processes, having a visibility of the learner voice and engagement, and most importantly, reducing administrative burden. So we are right now looking at an AI rollout journey with a focus on decreasing administrative burden so that our staff can spend more time with the learners. So that is a goal that we are pursuing at this time. So some of our tools that we provide our teams to have data visible, feedback visible, and also be able to track and look at various elements in the organization. Now, there's a key thing about data. Because we all report to TEC and we have the learner management system, CRMs, whole lot of technology, we all collect data. There's a lot of data that we collect, and data always has stories to tell. But we need to know what is the right question to ask. Now, example is how we were looking at our Pacifica performance. We were looking at our Pacifica performance. At one point, Pacifica were performing about 15% behind all other groups within our organization. So we want to sit down and say, okay, what is causing this? So let's look at data. Let's look at all the programs. Which programs are performing better? Which programs are not performing better? Let's look at the program that is not performing better. In the program, which courses are performing better? Which courses are not performing better? So one of the findings that we found in late 2023 was we looked at a trend. The learners were doing very well for the first 3 blocks of the program, and the last block of the program, they were not doing good, Pacifica learners especially. And it was not just one program, it was actually evident more than one program. Now, when we looked at it and we said, okay, what is causing this? There were a couple of things that were happening in the background. One was, this was the block where the learners were going to work placement. That means they're actually going from our environment into a work-like environment to complete their practical requirements to achieve their qualification. The second thing is also this life happens with learners because of the duration of the program. The assessment structure, which is about reflections and a lot of writing, was not very conducive for these learners. Now, when we identify these ones, then we go back and say, okay, how do we actually provide targeted support earlier and also during the stage? So there were multiple things we had to do. First, we had to go and look at all the placement providers that we had and say, okay, which providers are really good at supporting learners, which providers learners are not really successful. It is not a matter of the provider being good or not. It is the provider and the teams having the time, the capability, and the intent to support learners to finish their program. Then we just decided, okay, we need to increase the number of providers we have. We need to be able to choose providers that enable learner success. Then we also looked at having a specific resource that supports learners when they're on placement, and also being aware of that we had to do a lot of pre-preparation work to make the learners ready for that, and also be in touch with them for more. And then the other thing is that if learners are actually dropping at the end of the program, where there is no work placement, can we, because of life issues or anything, can we give them an opportunity to come back next year when their life is not busy and join some other cohort and finish the last paper that they didn't finish? So there are various strategies that can come when we understand the data. So we look at it and we say, okay, data is really important, but we need to really know what questions we are asking. And also now with AI, data analysis is not so hard. It's fascinating what would take us weeks and weeks and weeks and scratching our heads. We could find patterns using AI tools much, much quicker. We are in the people business. This is something probably one of our founding directors told me a long time ago, which was like, oh, you're not in education business, you're in people business, because that's the truth. We are engaging with people at all points. What we are selling is education, which involves a lot of people, and what we are selling are services to people. So people are centric to everything we do. So one of the things we started doing was something called as Know Your Student, or KYS pilot. So it is just a 15-minute structured conversation within the first 2 weeks of enrollment and led by the lead lecturer of that program. So the purpose is to ask a series of small questions to the learners, right? Right, what motivates you to be here? What is your short-term goal? What is your long-term goal? How do you learn better? Are there any personal commitments or things that might hinder you from finishing your program? So just understanding the learner in general. So what it does is it builds an earlier connection with the learners and trust. They know people by name. It helps identify any barriers early. It enables us to provide a personalized support, and it also supports learner retention. On the screen on the other side, that's a live example of a KYS conversation one of our team members had with a student. It just gives you an example of that. But the underlying factor is that end of the day, we are all people. When we know each other, when we know that, hey, these people are really wanting to see me successful, and I mean something for them, the likelihood of people continuing, stay and succeed and talk about their problems is significantly higher. The pilot we did had really good results, so we'll be looking at it at the broader organization as well. This is a hot potato topic, I guess, because typically we keep academics and operations very, very separate, but I cannot emphasize enough on building the right blocks. So there was a very good example of a program that we were looking at, which had relatively low completions. So we just went and talked to some of the teams and students and say, hey, what's going on here? And one of the factors we found was the assessments methodology was not relevant to the group of students we are using. So then we went back to the program design and we said, okay, what is the structure and sequence of learning? What is the relevance to learner goals? Are we actually looking at the learner's strengths? And is our approach practical and accessible? And then we looked at the assessments, right? Are they fair and aligned to learning outcomes and not unnecessarily complex? We have a tendency in academics to make things hard because there's always things that are harder to achieve should be for some reason better. But when we look at a program and say, he's a level 2 student, they're going to a specific purpose, are we actually preparing them and giving skills to be successful to the next pathway? Or are we actually trying to create this graduate and give them a lot of skills that might not be necessarily useful in their career and also hinders them from progress? So when we look at this, there's an example of a program that we did. There are multiple factors, but one of the key things you could see, it went from 77.2% to 91.6% course completion rate. When we actually went and looked at the design and we actually said, okay, can we look at it and look at fixing this at the view of the learner in the center? Now, when we are designing programs now, we look at the target learner group. Who is our target? Is this relevant? Is this structured well? Are we making it harder than necessary? Okay, can we actually embed learner success elements? Now, there are 2 examples of this. When we had to design youth programs, we had 2 options. Either we could go for a longer program. That means we need less number of learners to consume our funding, or we can go a shorter program that is very tailored to the kind of learners we're going, but we'll take the risk of needing more learners to consume our funding. We took the former, we said, right, I think the best approach for us would be to design a program that the learners will enjoy, develop meaningful skills, finish in a short period of time. The first year result of that was 70% qual completions in youth context, which was really, really good. Now, when we talk about embedding learner success elements, we have a technical program that we launched. When we looked at this program, we had a lot of industry stakeholders, and we said, okay, people have done this program before. What was causing people to not be successful? There were various factors, but one of the important factor was mathematics skills. So what we have done is we said, right, for the first 2 blocks of the program, math is going to be compulsory, and it's going to be an additional cost for us. The learner can do a test at the beginning. If they do really well in the test, you don't need to attend a math class. But if you don't do well in the test, you are going to attend an additional math session every week for the first 2 blocks. It will be a learner agreement. Now, that would cost a significant of money, but when we look at it, the learner success and the retention that we can actually achieve, and the enabling learners to progress and address their barriers was quite substantial. Probably, I think this is something for across us as a sector. It's just looking at the evolving learning environment. So we have a lot of AI and data analytic tools that are available. It helps us for faster analysis and solution design. So if you want to implement a KYS strategy, you could go to an AI tool and talk about the outcomes you want, and it could give you a process and a form for it in a matter of minutes. And it's in a very good structure, as long as you know to make the judgment call whether it's good or not. So it is going to be useful in many ways for supporting decision making and learner support. And the more of us who use AI as an important tool in our organization, that will make us move faster. Now, the other thing which is really important is shift in learning models. When we are looking at our learning right now, we are still based on a time-based learning model that is supported by a competency-driven learning. Now, the time-based model was introduced in 1900s through the Carnegie system, and 1990s in New Zealand through our reform of education. Now, this system is fantastic for young learners who leave school. It gives them a structured approach and gives them the time to mature while they're developing a whole set of skills, which are essential for success in life. But when we actually look at our adult learners, it is quite important for us to accelerate learning to actually be able to accelerate learning success. So that would be an important direction, I think, as a sector for everybody to have a look at. We also look at our increasing focus. Where would the focus be? The focus would be more on application of knowledge, judgment and problem framing, and human skills, because AI will have an impact on the future of workforce. And changing education expectations also. It's going to go from learn, memorize, prove, apply, to more with started context, apply, learn what's needed, and refine. So it's really important at this time. In the next 5 years, we are up for a significant change in our learning environment. So we need to see how we will evolve with it as well to remain relevant. Finally, learner success requires continuous effort and adaptation. What works today may not work tomorrow. When results fall, we have to go back to diagnostics. So what we are showcasing here are the things that work for us. There are 100 other things that never work for us. And we always go back and say, okay, what is the solution here? Sometimes you get this aha moment when you're looking at it long enough. No single strategy drives success. So outcomes are a combination of approaches, whether it is program design, targeted support, people capability, data-informed decisions. It is going to be a combination of things. Even if you look at an example of one of the programs we presented here, it is the ability to improve our people, make sure the structure of learning was really relevant and good, and then fixing other issues like the last block fallouts, everything, that all of them together drive results for that program area. And also, we always say there's a lot we can do. But being a PTE, budgets, the funding of how much we can actually contribute towards learner success is quite limited, especially for small PTEs. So it is always about looking at small goals, priorities, and working on a long run. But what ALSF has done, though, it has helped us tick some of those blue sky projects that we thought would take us for 3 or 4 years, but to be able to really bring it with a focused approach and get them done at early. We just finished those projects last year. There's still a lot of rollout and implementation work that will go across with it. But we're very thankful with the opportunity provided with TEC. So my closing comments would be learning success is not about doing more. It is about choosing what matters and doing it well consistently. Thank you.